Shabbat Shalom, everybody. Welcome to Keys to the Garden group on Keys to the Kingdom page. We're actually doing our study today in the Keys to the Garden group, so I hope everybody was able to find the group, join the group, if you're not already in the group. This way you can study along with us. Today we're actually going to be reading through a book called The Shepherd's Look at Psalm 23. And it has to do with Psalm 23, the Lord is my shepherd. And it's actually from a shepherd's perspective. So we're going to look at Psalm 23 through the eyes of a shepherd today. This is going to be in 4 parts. Okay, we're going to go through 4 chapters each time. And at the end, I will be doing a book giveaway. I don't know how many books yet that I'll have to give away, but I will be doing a book giveaway. I hope everybody's able to find the Keys to the Garden group. And I hope you guys are able to join in the group. This is our first time doing a video inside of a group. So I hope it doesn't limit the visibility of the video. It's very possible that could happen. So I'm going to go ahead and get started. I know that there's probably a lot less notifications going out, being that it's in a group. But we'll go ahead and get started, and then I'll just post it to the Keys to the Kingdom page when we're done, so that everybody who's not in the group can see it. And as we're going through these 4 parts, let me know if you're interested in entering for the drawing for the book giveaway. Like I said, as of right now, I don't know how many books I'm going to have, but I will be doing a book giveaway. That is A Shepherd's Look at Psalm 23. And this all has to do with Psalm 23, the Lord is my shepherd, and it's from a shepherd's perspective. So as we go through these videos, I'll have you comment below if you are interested in the book giveaway that we'll be doing at the end of the entire 4-part study of this book, okay? So let's go ahead and get into the 4 chapters today. And it's interesting, it kind of breaks down the chapters by verse, like the main verses within Psalm 23. And again, I thought this was going to be so appropriately done in the Keys to the Garden group because of its tie-in to agriculture, and the entire Bible from beginning to end is written from an agricultural perspective. And when you are immersed in understanding agriculture, your understanding very much deepens as to what God was trying to convey, and what his children were also conveying. But the things that God said and the things that God did were usually conveyed with words having to do with agriculture. So it really makes the word come alive even more. But this particular book isn't so much focused on planting and harvesting as it is owning a flock of sheep, and how to tend and care for them, and how that pertains to us as children of God. Okay, just trying to allow some more people to come on. It seems like, being that it's in a group, Facebook will probably not notify anybody, because Facebook Facebook and I don't have a good relationship, so I would not be surprised. So chapter 1 has to do with, so it's like I said, each chapter is based on sort of focusing on certain verses in the Psalm 23. And chapter 1 is the Lord is my shepherd. So it says, the Lord. But who is this Lord? What is his character? Does he have adequate credentials to be my shepherd, my manager, my owner? And if he does, how do I come under his control? In what way do I become the object of his concern and diligent care? These are penetrating, searching questions, and they deserve honest, basic examination. One of the calamities of Christianity is our tendency to talk in ambiguous generalities. David, the author of the poem, himself a shepherd and the son of a shepherd, later to be known as the shepherd king of Israel, stated explicitly that the Lord is my shepherd. So to whom did he refer? He referred to Yahuwah, the Lord God of Israel. His statement was confirmed by Yeshua the Messiah when he was incarnated among men. He declared emphatically, I am the good shepherd. But who was this Messiah? Our view of him is often too small and too cramped, too provincial and too human. And because it is, we feel unwilling to allow him to have authority or control, much less outright ownership of our lives. He it was who was directly responsible for the creation of all things, both natural and supernatural, because we see in Colossians 1:15-20 that he helped to create all things. And if we pause and reflect on the person of Messiah, on his power and his achievements, suddenly, like David, we will be glad to say and state proudly, the Lord, he is my shepherd. But before we can do this, it helps to hold clearly in mind the particular part played upon our history by the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. God the Father is the author, the originator of all that exists. It was in his mind first that all took shape. Then we have the Son, the Messiah, who is the artisan, the artist, the creator of all that exists. He brought into being all that had been originally formulated in his Father's mind. And then the Holy Spirit, who is the agent who presents these facts to both my mind and my spiritual understanding so that they become real and relative to me as an individual. Now, the beautiful relationships given to us repeatedly in Scripture between God and man are those of a father to his children and a shepherd to his sheep. These concepts were first conceived in the mind of God, our Father. They were made possible and practical through the work of the Messiah, and they're confirmed and made real to me through the agency of the Holy Spirit. So when the simple, though sublime statement is made by a man or woman that the Lord is my shepherd, it immediately implies a profound yet practical working relationship between a human being and his maker. It links a lump of common clay to divine destiny, and it means a mere mortal becomes the cherished object of divine diligence. This thought alone should stir my spirit, quicken my own sense of awareness, and lend enormous dignity to myself as an individual. To think that God in Messiah is deeply concerned about me as a particular person immediately gives great purpose and enormous meaning to my short journey on this planet. And the greater, the wider, the more majestic my concept is of Messiah, the more vital will be my relationship with him. Obviously, David in this psalm is speaking not as the shepherd, though he was one, but as the sheep, one of the flock. He spoke with a strong sense of pride. and devotion and admiration. It was as though he literally boasted aloud, "Look at who my shepherd is, my owner, my messenger. My manager. The Lord is." After all, he knew from firsthand experience that the lot in life of any particular sheep depended on the type of man who owned it. Some men were gentle, kind, intelligent, brave, and selfless in their devotion to their stock. Under one man, sheep would struggle, starve, suffer endless hardship. In another's care, they would flourish and thrive contently. So if the Lord is my shepherd, I should know something of his character and understand something of his ability. To meditate on this, I frequently go out at night. Actually, I'm going to skip this part. I'm not going to read every single paragraph. Basically, I go out at night and I stare at the stars in the sky and I remind myself of his majesty and his might. All this is a bit humbling and it drains the ego from a man and puts things in its proper perspective. It makes me see myself as a mere mite of material in an enormous world. Yet the staggering facts remain that Messiah, the creator of such an enormous world of overwhelming magnitude, designs to call himself my shepherd and invites me to consider myself his sheep. His special object of affection and attention is me. Who better could care for me? By the same sort of process, I stoop down and pick up a handful of soil from the backyard or the roadside. Placing it under an electron microscope, I am astounded to discover it teems with billions upon billions of microscopic organisms. Many of them are so complex in their own particular cellular structure that even a fraction of their functions on the earth are not yet properly understood. Yes, he is the Messiah, the Son of God, brought all of this into being. From the most gigantic of stars to the most minute microbe, all function flawlessly in accordance with definite laws of order and unity, which are utterly beyond the mind of finite man to master. It is in this sense, first of all, that I am basically bound to admit that his ownership of me as a human being is legitimate, simply because it is he who brought me into being, and no one is better able to understand or care for me. I belong to him simply because he deliberately chose to create me as the object of his own affection. It is patently clear that most men and women refuse to acknowledge this fact. Their deliberate attempts to deny that such a relationship even exists or could exist between man and his maker demonstrate their abhorrence of admitting that anyone really can claim ownership or authority over them by virtue of bringing them into being. In other words, typical man who doesn't know God has no desire to acknowledge their creator or admit that he brought them into being. This was, of course, the enormous risk or calculated chance, if we may use that term, which God took in making man initially, because of course we have free will, so we can deny our maker if we want to. But in his usual magnanimous manner, he took the second step in attempting to restore this relationship, which is repeatedly breached by men who turn their back on him. Again, in Messiah, he demonstrated at the cross the deep desire of his heart to have men come under his benevolent care. He himself absorbed the penalty for their perverseness, stating clearly that all we like sheep have gone astray. We have turned every one to his own way, and the Lord hath laid upon him the iniquity of us all. That's Isaiah 53:6, by the way. Thus, in a second, very real and vital sense, I truly belong to him simply because he has bought me again at the incredible price of his own laid down life and shed blood. Therefore, he was entitled to say, I am the good shepherd. The good shepherd giveth his life for the sheep. This was Yeshua that said this. So there remains the moving realization that we have been bought with a price, and that we really are not our own, and he is well within his right to lay claim upon our lives. I recall quite clearly how in my first venture with sheep, the question of paying a price for my ewes was so terribly important. They belonged to me only by virtue of the fact that I paid hard cash for them. It was money earned by the blood and sweat and tears drawn from my own body during the desperate grinding years of the Depression. So this gentleman who wrote this book, who is a shepherd, went through the Depression. And when I bought the first small flock, I was buying them literally with my own body, which had been laid down with this day in mind. Because of this, I felt in a special way that they were, in a very truth, a part of me and I a part of them. There was an intimate identity involved with which, though not apparent on the surface to the casual observer, nonetheless made these 30 ewes exceedingly precious to me. But the day I bought them, I also realized that this was the first stage in a long, lasting endeavor in which from then on I would, as their owner, have to continually lay down my life for them if they were to flourish and prosper. Sheep do not just take care of themselves, as some might suppose. They require more than any other class of livestock, endless attention and meticulous care. It is no accident that God has chosen to call us his sheep. The behavior of sheep and human beings is similar in many ways and will be seen in further chapters. Our mass mind or mob mentality or mob instincts, our fears and timidity, our stubbornness and stupidity, our perverse habits are all parallels of profound importance. Yet despite these adverse characteristics, Messiah chose us, buys us, calls us by name, makes us his own, and delights in caring for us. It is this last aspect which is really the third reason why we are under obligation to recognize his ownership of us. He literally lays himself out for us continually. He is ever interceding for us. He is ever guiding us by the Spirit. He is ever working in our behalf to ensure that we will benefit from his care. In fact, Psalm 23 might well be called David's hymn of praise to divine diligence, for the entire poem goes on to recount the manner in which the Good Shepherd spares no pains for the welfare of his sheep. Little wonder that the poet took pride in belonging to the shepherd. Why shouldn't he? In memory, I can still see one of the sheep ranches in our district, which was operated by a tenant sheepman. So somebody came in to care for somebody else's sheep. He ought never to have been allowed to keep sheep. His stock were always thin, weak, riddled with disease or parasites. Again and again, they would come and stand at the fence, staring blankly through the woven wire at the green, lush pastures which my flock enjoyed. So they would come and stare at his flock's pasture. Had they been able to speak, I'm sure they would have said, "Oh, to be set free from this awful owner." This is a picture which has never left my memory. It is a picture of pathetic people the world over who have not known what it is to belong to the Good Shepherd. So I want you to catch this. This is a picture of people over the whole world who have not known what it is to belong to the Good Shepherd, who suffer instead under sin and Satan. How amazingly it is that individual men and women vehemently refuse and reject the claims of Messiah on their lives. They fear that to acknowledge his ownership is to come under the rule of a tyrant. Oftentimes, if you listen to non-believers or atheists, to even suggest that you are a slave to Messiah or to God, it sounds exactly what it sounds like. It sounds to them and means to them exactly what it sounds like, that you're becoming some sort of slave to some sort of tyrant who owns you. But this is difficult to comprehend when one pauses to consider the character of Messiah. Admittedly, there have been many false caricatures of this person, but an unbiased look at his life quickly reveals an individual of enormous compassion and incredible integrity. He was the most balanced and perhaps the most beloved being ever to enter the society of men. Though born amidst the most disgusting surroundings, the member of a modest working family, he bore himself always with great dignity and assurance. Though he enjoyed no special advantages as a child, either in education or employment, his entire philosophy and outlook on life were the highest standards of human conduct ever set before mankind. Though he had no vast economic assets, political power, or military might, no other person ever made such an enormous impact on the world's history. Because of him, millions of people across almost 20 centuries of time have come into a life of decency and honor and noble conduct. We have to remember that the world he was born into, there was no noble conduct going on, particularly, even in Israel, who had gotten away from God. There was some proper conduct there, but amongst the nations, the conduct was almost always perverted in some way. Not only was he gentle and tender and true, but also righteous, stern as steel, and terribly tough on phony people. He was magnificent in his magnanimous spirit of forgiveness for fallen folk, but a terror to those who indulged in double talk or false pretenses. He came to set men free from their own sins, their own selves, their own fears. Those so liberated loved him with fierce loyalty. It is this one who insists that he was the Good Shepherd, the understanding shepherd, the concerned shepherd who cared enough to seek out and save and restore lost men and women. He never hesitated to make it quite clear that when an individual who came under his management and control, there would be a certain new and unique relationship between him and them. There would be something very special about belonging to this particular shepherd. There would be a distinct mark upon the man or woman that differentiated him or her from the rest of the crowd. And I think that's, and we're going to see in a minute, very interesting, and I want to sort of impress upon you that there would be a distinct mark. Of course, we know in the book of Revelation that it talks about having God's mark. Okay? There would be a distinct mark that would differentiate him or her from the rest of the crowd. The day I bought my first ewes, my neighbor and I sat on the dusty corral rails that enclosed the sheep's pen and admired the choice, strong, well-bred ewes that had become mine. Turning to me, he handed me a large, sharp killing knife and remarked tersely, "Well, Philip, they're yours. Now you'll have to put your mark on them." So he just bought his first flock of sheep, and now he has to put his mark on them. I knew exactly what he meant. Each shepherd has his own distinctive earmark, which he cuts into one of the ears of the sheep. In this way, even at a distance, it is easy to determine who the sheep belongs to. It was not the most pleasant process or procedure to catch each ewe in turn and lay their ear on a wooden block and then notch it deeply with a razor-sharp edge of a knife. There was pain for both of us, but from our mutual suffering, an indelible lifelong mark of ownership was made that could never be erased. And from then on, every sheep that came into my possession would bear my mark. And this is what every shepherd has to do to their flock. There is an exciting parallel to this in the Old Testament. When a slave in any Hebrew household chose of his own free will to become a lifelong member of that home, because a slave, after so much time, was offered the ability to be set free. But if they chose to stay under the ownership of their owner because they, loved their owner and enjoyed their care and their company, they could choose to stay with them and become a lifelong member of the household. But they were also subjected to a certain ritual. So his master and his owner would take him to the door, and he would put his earlobe against the doorpost, and with an awl puncture, he would puncture a hole through the ear, and from then on, he was a man marked for life as belonging to that house. For the man or woman who recognizes the claim of Messiah and gives allegiance to his absolute ownership, there comes the question of bearing his mark. The mark of the cross is that which should identify us with him for all time. The question is, does it? So this is saying that the cross is the mark that we bear. However, most of us who have read the entire Bible, that keep the Sabbath, would say that the Sabbath is actually Yahuwah's mark. Because it says, this is to be a sign between me and the children of Israel, that I am their God forever. So there's a lot of people who would actually argue today that it is the Shabbat and it is the Sabbath that is the mark of God. It is that distinct, because you have to understand that the whole world predominantly worshipped the sun. They were sun worshipers. Okay? And so Sunday, because that was the first day of the week, and they worshipped the sun, they would have never been worshiping, the entire world the pagan world never would have been worshiping on the seventh day. The seventh day was not considered a holy day to anyone except for Israel. So this is God's sign. So I would probably have to argue with the author as to what the actual mark of God is. But that's a different discussion for later. Yeshua made it very clear that he stated emphatically, if any man would be my disciple or follower, let him deny himself and take up his cross daily and follow me. Now that part I definitely agree with. That is also, yes, I mean, of course, a sign that we are to take up our cross and follow him daily. Basically, what it amounts to is this: a person exchanges the fickle fortunes of life, of living life by sheer whimsy, for the more productive and satisfying adventure of being guided by God. Basically, you're not just living life and making your own choices. You have decided to come under the ownership of God, under the direction of the Messiah and the Holy Spirit, so that you have a purpose and you're receiving direction and instruction from the Almighty. It is a tragic truth that many people who really have never come under his direction or management claim that the Lord is my shepherd. They seem to hope that by merely admitting that he is their shepherd, somehow they will enjoy the benefits of his care and management without paying the price of forfeiting their own fickle and foolish way of life. So, for example, maybe someone just verbalizes they believe in God, or they say that, maybe they even quote, "The Lord is my shepherd," but they're not actually allowing him to guide them. That's like when it says in the Bible that God says, "I will put a bit and bridle in your mouth," like you do a horse. A horse has to be tamed. A horse has to be broken. And you have to put a bit and bridle in a horse's mouth, the horse in the direction that you want to go. Otherwise, the horse is going to go wherever the horse wants to go, and you're not going to be able to lead the horse anywhere. One cannot have it both ways. Either we belong or we don't. Yeshua himself warned us that there would come a day when many would say, "Lord, in your name we did many wonderful things." But he will resort that he never knew us on his own, as his own. It is a most serious and sombering thought, which should make us search our own hearts and motives and personal relationship to himself. Do I really belong to him? Do I really recognize his right to me? Do I respond to his authority and acknowledge his ownership? Do I find freedom and complete fulfillment in this arrangement? Do I sense a purpose and in a deep contentment because I'm under his direction? Do I know rest and repose, besides a definite sense of exciting adventure, in belonging to him? If so, then with genuine gratitude and exaltation, I can exclaim proudly, just as David did, "The Lord is my shepherd." I am thrilled to belong to him, for it is thus that I shall flourish and thrive no matter what life brings my way. So now in chapter 2, it states, "I shall not want." What a proud, positive, bold statement to make. Obviously, this is the sentiment of a sheep utterly satisfied with his owner, perfectly content with its lot in life. Since the Lord is my shepherd, then I shall not want. Actually, the word want, as used here, has a more broader meaning than might be first imagined. No doubt the main concept is that of not lacking, not deficient in proper care, management, or husbandry. But a second emphasis is the idea of being utterly contented in the good shepherd's care, and consequently not craving or desiring anything more. This may seem like a strange statement for a man like David to have made if we think in terms of only physical or material needs. After all, he had been hounded and harried repeatedly by the forces of his enemy Saul, as well as by those of his own estranged son Absalom. He was obviously a man who had known intense privation, deep personal poverty, acute hardship, and the anguish of the spirit. Therefore, it is absurd to assert on the basis of this statement that the child of God the sheep in the shepherd's care, will never experience lack or need. It is imperative to keep a balanced view of the believer's life. To do this, it is well to consider the careers of men like Elijah or John the Immerser or Yeshua himself, and even modern men of faith such as Livingstone, to realize that all of them experienced great personal privation and adversity. When he was among us, the great shepherd himself warned his disciples before his great departure for glory that in this world you shall have tribulation, but be of good cheer, for I have overcome the world. One of the fallacies that is common among believers today is the assertion that if a man or woman is prospering materially, it is a significant mark of the blessing of God. That is a mistake that a lot of believers make, that if you are prospering materially, that is a mark of the blessing of God. However, of course, whatever we have materially is a blessing from God, but that is not necessarily a mark of the blessing of God, because as we know, there are people who are very wealthy materialistically, and they're as far from God as anyone could possibly be. But to think that this is a significant mark of the blessing of God upon his or her life is simply not so. Rather, in bold contrast, we read in Revelation 3:17, "Because thou sayest, I am rich, and increased with goods, and have need of nothing, and knowest not that thou art wretched, and miserable, and poor, and blight, and naked." I'm sure we're all familiar with that that verse in Revelation 3:17. That's one of the churches that Yeshua was speaking to, and this was the wealthy, rich, abundant congregation. Or in an equally pointed way, Yeshua made clear to the rich young ruler who wished to become his follower, "One thing thou lackest. Go thy way, sell whatever you have, and give it to the poor, and come and follow me." And we know that he was sad once Yeshua told him that, because he was very wealthy. Based on the teachings of the Bible, we can only conclude that David was not referring to material or physical poverty when he made the statement, "I shall not want." For this reason, the believer has to take a long, hard look at life. He has to recognize that with many of God's choice people before him, he may be called on to experience lack of wealth or material benefits. He has to see his sojourn upon this world as a brief interlude during which there may well be some privation in a physical sense. In other words, you might be lacking in a physical sense. Yet amid such hardship, he can still boast, "I shall not want, I shall not lack the expert care and management of my master." So to grasp the inner significance of this simple statement, it is necessary to understand the difference between belonging to one master or the other. To the good shepherd or to the impostor. Yeshua himself took great pains to point out to anyone who contemplated following him that it was quite impossible to serve two masters. One belonged either to him or to the other. When all is said and done, the welfare of any flock is entirely dependent upon the management afforded them by their owner. The tenant sheepman on the farm next to my first ranch was the most indifferent manager I had ever met. He was not concerned about the condition of his sheep. His land was neglected. He gave little or no time to his flock, letting them pretty well forage for themselves as best they could, both summer and winter. They fell prey to dogs, cougars, and rustlers. Every year, these poor creatures were forced to gnaw away at bare brown fields and impoverished pastures. Every winter, there was a shortage of nourishing hay and wholesome grain to feed the hungry ewes. Shelter to safeguard and protect the suffering sheep from storms and blizzards was scantly and inadequate. They had only polluted, muddy water to drink. There had been a lack of salt and other trace minerals needed to offset their sickly pasture. In their thin, weak, and diseased condition, these poor sheep were a pathetic sight. In my mind's eye, I can still see them standing at the fence, huddled sadly in little knots, staring wistfully through the wires at the rich pastures on the other side. To all their distress, the heartless, selfish owner seemed utterly callous and indifferent. Selfless ownership seemed he simply did not care. What if his sheep did want green grass, fresh water, shade, safety, and shelter from the storms? What if they did want relief from their wounds, bruises, disease, and parasites? He ignored their needs. He couldn't care less. Why should he? They were just sheep, fit for only the slaughterhouse. I never looked at those poor sheep without an acute awareness that this was a precise picture of those old, wretched taskmasters, sin and Satan, on this ranch, scoffing at the plight of those within their own power. It's like the perfect picture of how Satan rules over those who belong to him. He could care less. In fact, I think that Satan laughs at those under his care. As I have moved among men and women from all strata of society as both a lay pastor and a scientist, I have become increasingly aware of one thing. It is the boss, the manager, the master in people's lives who make the difference in their destiny. I have known some of the wealthiest men on this continent intimately. Also some of the leading scientists and professional people. Despite their dazzling outward show of success, despite their affluence and their prestige, they remain poor in spirit, shriveled in soul, and unhappy in life. They were joyless people, held in the iron grip and heartless ownership of the wrong master. By way of contrast, I have numerous friends among relatively poor people, people who have known hardship, disaster, and the struggle to stay afloat financially. But because they belong to Messiah and have recognized him as Lord and Master of their lives, their owner and their manager, they are permeated by a deep, quiet, settled peace that is beautiful to behold. It is indeed a delight to visit some of these humble homes where men and women are rich in spirit, generous in heart, and large of soul. They radiate a serene confidence and a quiet joy that surmounts all the tragedies of their time. They're under God's care, and they know it. They have entrusted themselves to Messiah's control and found contentment. Contentment should be the hallmark of the man or woman who has put his or her affairs in the hands of God. This especially applies to our affluent age. But the outstanding paradox is the intense fever of discontentment among people who are ever speaking of security. So basically, he's talking about how in our world today, now everybody has pretty much everything that they need. We're a very wealthy nation, and yet everybody is discontent. Despite an unparalleled wealth and material assets, we are outstandingly insecure and unsure of ourselves and well nigh bankrupt in spiritual values. Always men are searching for safety beyond themselves. They are restless, unsettled, covetous, greedy for more, wanting this and that, yet never really satisfied in spirit. By contrast, the simple believer, the humble person, the shepherd's sheep, can stand up proudly and boast, "The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want." I am completely satisfied with his management of my life. Why? Because he is the sheepman to whom no trouble is too great, and he cares for his flock. He is the rancher who is outstanding because of his fondness for sheep, who loves them for their own sake as well as his personal pleasure in them. He will, if necessary, be on the job 24 hours a day to see that they are properly provided for in every detail. Above all, he is very jealous of his name and his high reputation as the Good Shepherd. He's the owner who delights in his flock. For him there is no greater reward, no deeper satisfaction than that of seeing his sheep contented, well-fed, safe, and flourishing under his care. This is indeed his very life. He gives all he has to it. He literally lays himself out for those who are his. He will go to no end of trouble and labor to supply them with the finest grazing, the richest pasture, ample winter feed, and clean water. He will spare himself no pains to provide shelter from storms, protection from ruthless enemies, and the diseases and parasites to which sheep are susceptible. No wonder Yeshua said, "I am the good shepherd. The good shepherd giveth his life for the sheep." And again, "I am come that ye may have life, and that ye may have it more abundantly." From early dawn until late night, this utterly selfless shepherd is alert to the welfare of his flock. For the diligent sheepman arises early and goes out first thing every morning, without fail, to look over his flock. It is the initial intimate contact of the day. With a practiced, searching, sympathetic eye, he examines the sheep to see if they are fit, content, and able to be on their feet. In an instant, he can tell if they have been molested during the night, whether they are ill, or if there are some which require some special attention. Repeatedly throughout the day, he casts his eye over the flock to make sure that all is well. Nor even at night is he oblivious to their needs. He sleeps, as it were, with one eye and both ears open, ready at the least sign of trouble to leap up and protect his own. This is a sublime picture of the care given to those whose lives are under Messiah's control. He knows all about their lives from morning to night. Blessed be the Lord, who daily loadeth us with benefits, even the God of our salvation. He that keepeth thee will not slumber or sleep. In spite of having such a master and owner, the fact remains that some believers are still not content under his control. They are somewhat dissatisfied, always feeling that somehow the grass beyond the fence must be a little greener. These are carnal believers. One might also call them fence crawlers or half believers who want the best of both worlds. I once owned whose conduct exactly typified this sort of person. She was one of the most attractive sheep that ever belonged to me. Her body was beautifully proportioned. She had a strong constitution, an excellent coat of wool. Her head was clean, alert, well set, with bright eyes. She bore sturdy lambs that matured rapidly. But in spite of all these attractive attributes, she had one pronounced fault. She was restless, discontented, and a fence crawler. So much so that I called her Mrs. Gadabout. This one ewe produced more problems for me than almost all the rest of the flock combined. No matter what field or pasture the sheep were in, she would search all along the fence or shoreline, looking for a loophole she could crawl through and start to feed on the other side. It was not that she lacked pasturage. My fields were a joy and a delight. No sheep in the district had better grazing. With Mrs. Gadabout, it was an ingrained habit. She was simply never contented with things as they were. Often when she had forced her way through some such spot in the fence or found a way around the end of the wire at low tide on the beaches, she would end up feeding on bare, brown, burnt-up pasturage of the most inferior sort. So she actually preferred to go to the other side and eat brown grass. But she never learned her lesson and continued to fence crawl time after time. Now, it would have been bad enough if she was the only one who did this. It was a sufficient problem to find her and bring her back. But the further point was that she taught her lambs the same tricks. They simply followed her example, and soon they were skilled at escaping just like their mother. Even worse, however, was the example she set for the other sheep. In short time, she began to lead others through the same holes over the same dangerous paths down by the sea. After putting up with her perverseness for a summer, I finally came to the conclusion that to save the rest of the flock from becoming unsettled, she would have to go. I could not allow one obstinate, discontented ewe to ruin the whole ranch operation. It was a difficult decision to make, for I loved her the same way I loved the rest. Her strength and beauty and alertness were a delight to the eye. But one morning I took the killing knife in hand and butchered her. Her career fence crawling was cut short. It was the only solution to the dilemma. She was a sheep who, in spite of all that I have done for her and gave her the very best care, still wanted something else. Isn't that amazing? She was not like the one who said, "The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want." It is a solemn warning to the carnal believer, or the backslider, or the half-Christian, the half-believer, or the one who wants the best of both worlds, or the lukewarm. Sometimes in short order, they can be cut down. If anybody's watching, are you able to comment in the comments? I usually have a lot of comments here, and since this is my first time doing a video in the group, I don't know if the comments are turned off, but normally there's a lot of comments, so I'm not really sure if you're able to leave a comment. If you are, let me know. Okay, last chapter. This is, "He maketh me lie down in green pastures." So this is interesting, because David literally said, "The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want, and he maketh me lie down in green pastures." So from a shepherd's perspective, what does that mean? The strange thing about sheep is that because of their very makeup, it is almost impossible for them to be made to lie down unless 4 requirements are met. Owing to their own timidity, they refuse to lie down unless they are free of all fear. Because of the social behavior within a flock, sheep will not lie down unless they are free from friction with others of their kind. If tormented by flies or parasites, sheep will not lie down. Only when free from these pests can they relax. Lastly, sheep will not lie down as long as they feel in need of finding food. They must be free from hunger. It is significant that to be at rest, there must be a definite sense of freedom from fear, tension, aggravation, and hunger. The unique aspect of the picture is that it is only the sheepman himself who can provide release from these anxieties. It all depends upon the diligence of the owner whether or not his flock is free of disturbances. Is anyone able to leave comments? Or have you already left comments and I just can't see them here? I'm just wondering if the format is different doing a video inside of the group than it is on a regular page, because normally there's like a bunch of comments and there's none. If you can comment, just so I know that it's working. So when we examine each of these 4 factors that affect sheep so severely, we will understand why the part of the owner plays in their management is so tremendously, I'm sorry, let me just read that again. When we examine each of these 4 factors that affect sheep so severely, we will understand why the part the owner plays in their management is so tremendously important. It is actually he who makes it possible for them to lie down, to rest, and to relax, and to be content and quiet and flourishing. The flock that is restless, discontented, always agitated, and disturbed never does well. And the same is true of people. It is not generally known that sheep are so timid and easily panicked that even a stray jackrabbit suddenly bounding from behind a bush can stampede a whole flock. When one startled sheep runs in fright, a dozen others will bolt in blind fear, not waiting to see what even frightened them. If they just sense that one has ran or gotten scared, the rest of them will too. One day a friend came to call on us from the city. She had a tiny Pekingese pup along with her. As she opened the car door, the pup jumped out on the grass, and one glimpse of the unexpected little dog was enough. In terror, over 200 of my sheep, which were resting nearby, leaped up and rushed off across the pasture. As long as there is even the slightest suspicion of danger from dogs, coyotes, cougars, bears, or other enemies, the sheep stand up, ready to flee for their lives. They have little or no means of self-defense. They're helpless, timid, feeble creatures whose only recourse is to run. When I invited friends to visit us after the Pekingese episode, I always made it clear that their dogs were to be left at home. I also had to drive off or shoot other stray dogs that came to molest or disturb the sheep. 2 dogs have been known to kill as many as 292 sheep in a single night of unbridled slaughter. Ewes, heavy and lamb, when chased by dogs or other predators, will slip their unborn lambs and lose them in abortions. So if they get scared and they're chased by predators, they can abort their baby lambs. A shepherd's loss from such forays can be appalling. One morning at dawn, I found 9 of my choicest ewes, all soon to lamb or have babies, lying dead in the field where a cougar had harried the flock during the night. It was a terrible shock to a young man like myself, just new in the business and unfamiliar with such attacks. From then on, I slept with a .303 rifle and a flashlight by my bed. At the least sound of the flock being disturbed, I would leap from my bed, calling my faithful collie, dash out in the night, rifle in hand, ready to protect my sheep. In the course of time, I can realize that nothing so quieted and reassured the sheep as to see me in the field. The presence of their master and owner and protector put them at ease as nothing else could do, and this applied day and night. There was one summer when sheep rustling was a common occurrence in our district. Night after night, the dog and I were out under the stars, keeping watch over the flock by night, ready to defend them from raids of any rustlers. The news of my diligence spread across the grapevine of our backcountry roads, and the rustlers quickly decided to leave us alone and trade their tactics elsewhere. He maketh me lie down. In a believer's life, there is no substitute for their keen awareness that the shepherd is nearby. There is nothing like Messiah's presence to dispel the fear, the panic, the terror of the unknown. We live a most uncertain life. Any hour can bring disaster, danger, distress from unknown quarters. Life is full of hazards. No one can tell what a day will produce in new trouble. We live either in a sense of anxiety, fear, foreboding, or in a sense of quiet rest. Which is it? Generally, it is the unknown or the unexpected that produces these great panics. It is in the grip of fear that most of us are unable to cope with the cruel circumstances and harsh complexities of life. We feel that they are foes, which endanger our tranquility. Often our first impulse is simply to get up and run from them, just like sheep. Then, in the midst of our misfortunes, there suddenly comes the awareness that He, the Messiah, the Good Shepherd, is there. It makes all the difference. His presence in the picture throws a different light on the whole scene. Suddenly, things are not so black, nor nearly so terrifying. The outlook changes and there is hope. I find myself delivered from fear. Rest returns, and I can relax. This has come to me again and again as I grow older. This is the knowledge that my master, my friend, my owner has things under control even when they may appear calamitous. This gives me great consolation, repose, and rest. Now I lay me down in peace and sleep, for thou, God, keepest me. It is the special office work of God's grace, of God's gracious Spirit, that conveys this sense of the Messiah to our fearful hearts. He comes quietly to reassure us that Messiah himself is aware of our dilemma and deeply involved in it with us. And it is in fact in this assurance that we rest and relax. For God has not given us a spirit of fear. For God has not given us a spirit of fear, but of power and of love and a sound mind. The idea of a sound mind is that of a mind at ease, at peace, not perturbed or harassed or obsessed with fear and foreboding of the future. I will both lay me down in peace and sleep, for thou, Lord, only makest me dwell in safety. The second source of fear from which the sheepman delivers his sheep is that of tension or rivalry, cruel competition within the flock itself. In every animal society, there is an established order of dominance or status within the group. In a pen full of chickens, it is referred to as the pecking order. Within cattle, it is called the horning order. Among sheep, we speak of the butting order. Generally, an arrogant, cunning, and domineering old ewe will be the boss of any bunch of sheep. She maintains her position of prestige by butting and driving other ewes or lambs away from the best grazings or favorite backgrounds. So that means it's the female. Succeeding her in precise order, the other sheep all establish and maintain their exact position in the flock by using the same tactics of butting and thrusting at those below and around them. A vivid and accurate word picture of this process is given to us in Ezekiel 34, 15 through 16 and 20 through 22. Let's read that. Ezekiel 34. And while I'm looking this up, if you can comment in the comments, because I just want to make sure that it's working, since this is my first time doing a video in the group, because I feel like the comments aren't working. Okay, Ezekiel 34. (15 and 16) says, Yes, I will pasture my sheep, and I will let them rest. I will seek the lost, bring back the outcasts, bandage the broken, and strengthen the sick. But the fat and the strong I will destroy. I will feed them with judgment. So you see how that pertains to, how it says the fat and the strong, how he was talking about his sheep, and how he had to put the one down. She was the, the most beautiful and strongest, and but they go around butting the other sheep. This is a startling example, in fact, of the scientific accuracy of the scriptures in describing a natural phenomenon. Because of this rivalry, tension, and competition for status and self-assertion, there is friction in the flock. The sheep cannot lie down to rest in contentment. Always they must stand up and defend their rights and contest the challenge of the intruder. Hundreds and hundreds of times I have watched an austere old ewe walk up to a younger one, which may have been feeding contently or resting quietly in some sheltered spot. She would arch her neck, tilt her head, dilate her eyes, and approach the others with a stiff-necked gait. All of this was saying, in the unmistakable terms, move over, out of my way, give up ground or else. And if the other ewe did not immediately leap to her feet in self-defense, she would be butted unmercifully. Or if she did rise up to accept the challenge, one or two strong thrusts would soon send her scurrying for safety. I don't think the comments are working. I don't know why. That is so weird. I don't think the comments are working. Well, that's what happens when you do a video inside of a group, I guess. This continuous conflict and jealousy within the flock can be the most detrimental thing. The sheep become edgy, tense, discontented, and restless. They lose weight and become irritable. One point that always interested me very much was that whenever I came into view and my presence attracted their attention, the sheep quickly forgot their foolish rivalries and stopped their fighting. The shepherd's presence made all the difference in their behavior. This, to me, has always been a graphic picture of the struggle for status in human society. There is the eternal competition to keep up with the Joneses, or as it is now, to keep up with the Joneses' kids. In any business firm, in any office, in any family, any community, any church, any human organization or group, be it large or small, the struggle for self-assertion and self-recognition goes on. Many of us fight to be top sheep. We butt, we quarrel, we compete, and to get ahead. And in the process, we hurt people. It is here that much jealousy arises. This is where petty peeves grow into horrible hate. It is where ill will and contempt come into being. The place where heated rivalry and deep discontent is born. It is here that discontent gradually grows into a covetous way of life, where one has to be forever standing up for himself, for his rights, or standing up just to get ahead of the crowd. In contrast to this, the picture in the Psalm shows us God's people laying down in quiet contentment. One of the outstanding marks of a believer should be a serene sense of gentle contentment. Godliness with contentment is great gain. Paul put it this way: I have learned in whatsoever state I am, therewith to be content. And certainly this applies to my status in society. The endless unrest generated in the individual who is always trying to get ahead of the crowd, who is attempting always to be top man or woman on the totem pole, is pretty formidable to observe. In his own unique way, Yeshua the Messiah, the great shepherd, in his earthly life pointed out that the last would be first and the first would be last. In a sense, I am sure he meant first in the area of his own intimate affection. For any shepherd has great compassion for the poor, weak sheep that gets butted about by the more domineering ones. More than once I have strongly troused a belligerent ewe for abusing a weaker one. Or when they butted lambs not their own, I found it necessary to discipline them severely, and certainly they were not first in my esteem for their aggressiveness. Another point that has impressed me too was that the less aggressive sheep were often far more contented, quiet, and restful. So there were definite advantages to being bottom sheep. But more important was the fact that it was the shepherd's presence that put an end to all rivalry. And in our human relationships, when we become acutely aware of being in the presence of Messiah, our foolish, selfish snobbery and rivalry will end. It is the humble heart walking quietly and contentedly in the close and intimate relationship with Messiah that is at rest, that can relax, simply glad to lie down and let the world go by. When my eyes are on my Master, they are not on those around me. This is the place of peace. It is good and proper to remind ourselves that in the end it is He who will decide and judge what my status really is. After all, it is His estimation of me that is of consequence. Any human measurement is at best, is bound to be pretty unpredictable, unreliable, and far from final. To be thus close to Him, conscious of His abiding presence, made real in my mind emotions, and will, by the indwelling of the gracious Spirit, is to be set free from fear of my fellow man and whatever he might think of me. I would much rather have the affection of the Good Shepherd than occupy a place of prominence in society, especially if I had attained it by fighting, quarreling, and bitter rivalry with my fellow human beings. Blessed, or happy, or to be envied, blessed are the merciful, for they shall obtain mercy. As is the case with freedom from fear of predators or friction within the flock, the freedom of fear from the torment of parasites and insects is essential to the contentment of sheep. This aspect of their behavior will be dealt with in greater detail later in the psalm, but it is nevertheless important to mention it here. Sheep, especially in the summer, can be driven to absolute distraction by nasal flies, bot flies, warble flies, and ticks. When tormented by these pests, it is literally impossible for them to lie down and rest. Instead, they are up and on their feet, staggering their legs, shaking their heads, ready to rush off into the bush for relief from pests. Only the diligent care of the owner, who keeps a constant outlook for these insects, will prevent them from annoying his flock. A good shepherd will apply various types of insect repellents to his sheep. He will see that they are dipped to clear their fleeces of ticks. And he will see that there are shelter belts of trees and bush available where they can find refuge and release from their tormentors. This all entails considerable care. It takes time to labor and expensive chemicals to do the job thoroughly. It means, too, that the sheepman must be amongst his charges daily, keeping a close watch on their behavior. As soon as there is the least evidence that they are being disturbed, he must take steps to provide them with relief. Always uppermost in his mind is the aim of keeping his flock quiet, contented, and at peace. So similarly to the believer's life, there are bound to be many small irritations, like traffic, There are the annoyances of petty frustrations and ever reoccurring disagreeable experiences. In modern terminology, we refer to these upsetting circumstances or people as being bugged. Is there an antidote for them? Can we come into a place of quiet contentment despite them? The answer for the one in Messiah's care is a definite yes. This is one of the main functions of the gracious Holy Spirit. In Scripture, he is often symbolized by oil, by that which brings healing and comfort and relief from the harsh and abrasive aspects of life. The Holy Spirit makes real to me the very presence of Messiah. He brings quietness, serenity, strength, and calmness in the face of frustration and futility. When I turn to him and expose the problem to him, allowing him to see that I have a dilemma, a difficulty, a disagreeable experience beyond my control, he comes to assist. Often a helpful approach is simply to say aloud, "Oh, Master, this is beyond me. I can't cope with it. It's bugging me. I can't rest. Please take over." Then he does take over in his own wondrous way. He applies the healing, soothing, effective antidote of his own person and presence to my particular problem. There immediately comes into my consciousness the awareness of his dealing with the difficulty in a way that I had not anticipated. And because of the assurance that he will become active on my behalf, there steals over me a sense of quiet contentment. I am able to lie down in peace and rest, all because of what he does. Finally, to produce the conditions necessary for a sheep to lie down, there must be freedom from the fear of hunger. This, of course, is clearly implied in the statement, "He maketh me lie down in green pastures." It is not generally recognized that many of the great sheep countries of the world are dry, semi-arid areas. Most breeds of sheep flourish best in this sort of terrain. They are susceptible to fewer hazards of health or parasites where the climate is dry. But in those same regions, it is neither natural nor common to find green pastures. For example, in Palestine, where David wrote the psalm and kept his father's flocks, especially near Bethlehem, it is dry, brown, sunburned wasteland. Green pastures did not just happen by chance. Green pastures were the product of tremendous labor, time, and skill in land use. Green pastures were the result of clearing rough, rocky land, of tearing out brush and roots and stumps, of deep plowing and careful soil preparation, of seeding and planting special grains and legumes, of irrigating with water and husbanding with care of the crops of forage that would feed the flocks. So it didn't just happen in Israel that there were green pastures. Israel is, not predominantly green. All of this represented tremendous toil and skill and time for the care of the shepherd. If his sheep were to enjoy green pastures amid the brown, barren hills, it meant he had done a tremendous job. He had a tremendous job to do. But green pastures are essential to success with sheep. When lambs are maturing and ewes need green, succulent feed for their heavy milk to flow, there is no substitute for green pasturage. No sight so satisfies the sheep owner as to see his flock well and quietly fed to repletion on green, rich forage, able to lie down and rest and gain. In my own ranching operations, one of the keys to the entire enterprise is lay in the developing rich, lush pastures for my flocks. On at least 2 ranches, there were old, worn-out, impoverished fields that were either bare or infested with inferior forage plants. By skillful management and scientific land use, These were soon converted into flourishing fields knee-deep in rich green grass and legumes. On such forage, it was common to have lambs reach 100 pounds in weight within 100 days from birth. The secret to this was that the flock could fill up quickly, then lie down quietly and rest and ruminate. A hungry, ill-fed sheep is ever on its feet and on the move, searching for another scantly mouthful of forage to try and satisfy its gnawing hunger. Such sheep are not contented, and they do not thrive. They are no use to themselves nor their owners. They languish and they lack vigor and vitality. In the scriptures, the picture portrayed of the promised land, to which God tried so hard to lead Israel from Egypt, was that of a land flowing with milk and honey. Not only is this figurative language, but also essentially scientific terminology. In agricultural terms, we speak of milk flow and honey flow. By this we mean the peak season of spring and summer, when pastures are at their most productive stages. The livestock that feeds on the forage and the bees that visit the blossoms are said to be producing a corresponding flow of milk and honey. So a land flowing with milk and honey is a land of rich, green, luxuriant pastures. And when God spoke of such a land for Israel, he also foresaw such an abundant life of joy and victory and contentment for his people. For the child of God, the Old Testament account of Israel moving from Egypt into the promised land is a picture of us moving from sin into the life of overcoming victory. We are promised such a life. It has been provided for us and is made possible by the unrelenting effort of the Messiah on our behalf. How he works to clear the life of rocks of stony unbelief. He attempts to break up the hard, proud human heart that is set like sun-dried clay. He tries to tear out the roots of bitterness. He then sows the seed of his own precious word, which, if given half a chance to grow, will produce rich crops of contentment and peace. He waters this with the dew and rain of his own presence by the Holy Spirit. He tends and cares and cultivates the life, longing to see it become rich and green and productive. It is all indicative of the unrelenting energy and industrious owner, an industry of an owner who wishes to see his sheep satisfied and well fed. It all denotes my shepherd's desire to see my best interests served. His concern for my care is beyond my comprehension, really. At best, all I can do is enjoy and revel in what he has brought into effect. This life of quiet overcoming, of happy repose, of rest in his presence, of confidence in his management is something few believers ever fully enjoy. Because of our own perverseness, we often prefer to feed on the barren ground of the world around us. I used to marvel at how some of my sheep actually chose inferior forage at times. But the Good Shepherd has supplied green pastures for those who care to move on to them and there find peace and plenty. Wow, that really gives us a really nice picture of exactly what it means that the Lord is my shepherd, that I shall not want, and that he maketh me lie down in green pastures. Now I will never read that psalm the same. We kind of get the hint of it when we read it, but seeing it and understanding it from a shepherd's perspective really broadens and deepens that understanding. Okay. Oh, first comment. Okay, so the comments were working. Okay, that's good to know because, and it doesn't even say who it is. I feel like it's different when I do it inside of a group, the video inside of the group. I might not do it inside of the group next time just because it's very limited. When you go inside of a group, Facebook like limits even more like who will see it and who can say what. I don't know. But I'm so glad you enjoyed it. I hope that it brought to light what God does for us on a daily basis and how he meticulously cares for us at all times. That's the thing, is sometimes we might feel like he's close at more times than others, but he's actually caring for us 24/7 all the time. My phone was being weird at first. It looked different from prior. I couldn't go through actual invite to get to the event. No, you can't actually go through the invite to get to any event. You have to just go to the page. But it's strange because it says Facebook user. It's not even telling me who's writing the comment. Normally it does. So I might just do it. I'm just going to do it on the Keys to the Kingdom page next time instead of in the group. I thought I would do it in the group because it was more appropriate in the Keys to the Garden group. So you would just go to the Keys to the Garden group and it would be live. But that's fine. Oh, Tiffany! Yeah, that's so weird because normally it always tells me who is commenting. And this just says Facebook user. That's okay. I will post this on the Keys to the Kingdom page for the rest of those in Keys to the Kingdom to see. Next time I'll just do it live on the page because otherwise Facebook narrows it down and it, you know how it goes. But Shabbat Shalom. Have a wonderful resting Shabbat. I hope you spend the rest of your Shabbat laying down in green pastures quietly. And I haven't forgotten about doing the rest of our Leviticus study. We are going to finish the book of Leviticus. We are going to get through the book of Leviticus. I think we're going to do that on Tuesday. Probably Tuesday. Tuesday we will probably pick up where we left off reading in the book of Leviticus. And then next Shabbat, more than likely next Shabbat, I always say more than likely because I never know what my schedule is going to be. But more than likely next Shabbat, we will read the next 4 chapters of this and see what the shepherd has to say about the second part of this Psalm 23. The Lord is my shepherd. I hope you have a blessed rest of the Shabbat. And I hope that those of you who are in the Keys to the Garden group, I know most of you are actually gardening. I know that most of you are growing things actively. And some of you are just now starting to grow things for the first time. Which is very exciting because, you just have to dive right in. Nobody's born with a green thumb. It's a learned, it's something that you have to learn. It's, nobody's born with the knowledge that, this plant needs this and that plant needs that, and when to grow things. It's just something that you have to learn, but you have to start somewhere. So you start with growing little at a time, and then you keep adding, and you trust me, you learn something new every single year, every season. It's something new. So God bless you. Enjoy your Shabbat. May you rest in peace with the Good Shepherd. Amen. And I'll see you on Tuesday.